Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of Season 2. We have with us a very special guest indeed, and she is none other than Payal Khandwala, who is an artist turned designer and launched her eponymous label in 2012. Her clothes are beautiful, timeless creations that celebrate Indian art, heritage, traditions, artisans, fabrics, and so much more. And today we will be talking about sustainability in fashion from a designer's perspective. From choosing fabrics to putting out the final product, what does sustainability in design mean? How can it be made less wasteful? How can it empower India's non-farm rural economy where nearly 200 million people work as artisans? We will talk about how art and architecture impact her dressmaking to reflect her values as a minimalist. She's a designer that actively discourages people to buy, is against sales, and through her business and her leadership is propagating for a future where fashion is rid of its excesses. Hi, Payal. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
No worries. I'm so glad that you could make time for this. And if you could just start off by telling me a little bit about what inspired you to become a designer.
Well, actually, I started designing only in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say professionally only in 2012. But just to take you back a little bit, I grew up in a house that my mom painted, her mom painted, and they both sewed clothes. And so as I was growing up, there was always a machine in the house. And I did both these things sort of parallelly, Those were my influences. When I was little, I used to make clothes for my dolls and stuff. And when I studied fashion, I did it because I thought I would get to make all these fancy illustrations all the time. I don't know what gave me that idea. It was 100% not true. Because, the master doesn't care about a fancy illustration. He just really wants a tech drawing. I found that out quite quickly, but I always loved textiles and loved putting things together, and I liked the history of costume, those kinds of things. So I studied fashion, but then when I graduated, I didn't really want to pursue it because it didn't really didn't speak to me the way art did. That was always my first love, which is why I worked for other designers as part of my internship and things, but I didn't really have anything to say. I didn't know what clothes I wanted to make, why I wanted to make them. And I thought, gosh, I need to hire so many people. It's a business. It's the business of fashion. You have so little control beyond a certain point. At that point, I think I just wanted to do something that sort of set me free. And so I studied fine art. So then 10 years later, because then I went to New York and I studied it and I came back and then I was painting. Then for 10 years, I was painting. So I was gone for 8 years, came back and I was painting full time. When I came back to Bombay from New York, I couldn't find any clothes that I wanted to wear. I didn't see them around. Clothes that were comfortable but also stylish, not just dowdy. Clothes that were sort of dramatic but separates, things that would allow me to put my wardrobe together creatively. And so I used to make them. So the reason I started this label was not because there was some strategy to start a brand or anything like that. It was because it was an opportunity for me to show at Lakme Fashion Week. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I kind of tend to jump into things without thinking them through. So I thought, yeah, this would be fun. It'll be a shift in canvas. I do enjoy making clothes. I enjoy wearing clothes. I've collected so many vintage textiles over the years, and I thought, okay, what the hell? I'll just do it, and I'll make 16 garments because there were 16 exits in the show. And I thought, worst case scenario, nobody will want to buy them, and I'll have 16 new clothes that I can wear. So basically that was it. I didn't have any tailor, no factories. There was nothing. There was just me. And in 2 months, I, found someone who would make the clothes and then bought all the fabric or designed everything, put it together, designed a label and handbags and invoices and all of that. And that's how it started. So, that's what inspired me, was basically that everything I saw around me just didn't inspire me to want to buy it. And I felt that there weren't clothes that felt like they were Indian, but they were not too costumey and not too ethnic, something that I could buy here, but also wear when I was traveling abroad without having to feel like I was going to like a Diwali party, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Or
So I
Coachella
just thought,
in San Francisco.
yeah, well, now, I mean,
Or
this was many years ago. I don't know if Coachella even existed then, but yeah, exactly. Like either, the thing with the Indian clothes is that when you see them abroad, you see hippies wearing it. Some tie and dye kurta with beads and like some headscarf
yeah,
and aviators. Or it's like, shiny and you're wearing it for, some wedding. But there was no in between. And, I mean, come on, we have such amazing textiles, amazing colors. And I just felt like, why aren't we making something that could be so different in the fashion landscape, but still be Indian, but still sort of transcend those, geographic boundaries in a way, so that they're free from those cultural trappings. And you can't really put your finger on it, but it still has a soul that's deeply Indian, but so India modern in a way. So
yeah, I think it's quite unique, your journey, in terms of how you studied fashion and then fine art, but then you were working as a painter for such a long time before you decided to become a designer. I think that's quite a unique journey, because a lot of people may not necessarily spend significant amount of time just painting.
And actually, it was not even then, it was not a plan to become a designer. Even when I did that show, the idea was just to make those clothes for that show. I literally had no plan. I just wanted to see, do people like this? Do they get what I'm trying to say with the clothes? Because most of the clothes then were still coordinates, because India is so sari, blouse, petticoat, kurta, salwar, dupatta, ghagra, choli, dupatta, like it was always sets. And I was very keen that we do something that was separate, because what if I already had jeans and I just wanted a beautiful top, or I, already had the pants and I just wanted the shirt, or, whatever. And so it was very important for me to do a Pret line, which was separates then. And I think that for me, I think that was one of the key things, but it was never a decision that I made consciously. I just wanted to do it because it just didn't exist then in the way that I would have liked it to.
Yeah. And I like that it sort of came about from, your inspiration came about from the absence of inspiration in a way, right? Like
absolutely.
You didn't get this inspiration, or you didn't have access to certain kinds of clothes that you felt represented you. And it was that absence that inspired you to sort of fill that gap, which I think is great.
I think that also helps, because then you're not doing more of something that already exists. And when there's a void in a certain space or discipline, then you can make waves quickly also, because you filled in something which was obviously quite palpable, at least for me it was. And I thought there must be other women out there who get the DNA of the brand, who are missing the same things that I'm missing. But they have no choice, because not everyone's going to try to make the clothes themselves. They might not have the time or the inclination. And
or
so
the
I
skills.
think that was important. Or the skills. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that definitely reflects in the clothes that you do make, because, for example, I mean, I think first I should say this as a disclaimer, right? I don't actually have the language to describe fashion. So I cannot use all of that very specific vernacular that people and like magazines such as Vogue, etc., use to describe clothes. So I'm just going to describe it as how I see your clothes, which is regality with function. So that's what I see your clothes as, which is what appeals to me as well.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I've always tried as a label, also as a disclaimer, to distance myself from fashion, because I've never really subscribed to fashion. I never get a fashion magazine in the house, even now. And it's not something that I've ever felt any affinity to, ever. Even when I was growing up, even when I lived in New York, even when I worked for somebody who was a fashion designer. So for me, the clothes have very little to do with fashion, because they're more about personal style, and they're an extension of my personality, because I'm the only one that designs them. So there is a process by which things get filtered and get edited, because these, I have such a strict sense of do's and don'ts, things I like and things I dislike. So I think that I like, so I'm Gemini, okay, another disclaimer. So I like two opposing things at any given point in time. So I'm very practical as a person. I'm informal as a person. I want to be comfortable. I want my clothes to fit in a suitcase. I think of all these things. I want pockets and everything. I don't want to carry a bag. I want to wear flats. If I want to cross my legs when I sit down. Sometimes I cross my legs when I'm at a restaurant, even, much to the dismay of my husband, even if I'm sitting on a chair. So then I don't make clothes that won't allow me to do that. Only because this is how I am. This is an extension of my personality. But that said, I am free-spirited, but I also like things to be a certain way, classic, elegant. I want things to be beautifully finished, structured. I don't like the word anti-fit for. I don't like the word anti anything, to be quite honest. But I want things to fit a certain way. They don't have to be painted onto the body, but I try to balance those things. So when you say that, to me, when you think of something regal, it doesn't always. It's interesting you should say that, because to me, when I think of regal, I think of this whole princess hangover that India has, and everybody is looking like a queen and a king and a something. And I feel like, gosh, they look so uncomfortable, because, I don't know, they had chariots before, and now you might have to drive to your own wedding. And how are you going to do that if you can't fit in the car? Right. So I feel that clothes have to be relevant. So yes, of course, dressing up is an escape, and you want to feel, I don't know, whatever you want to feel, posh or glamorous or sexy or regal or whatever it is. But for me, it's very important to marry it with function, because I think that as a woman making clothes for other women, I want to make clothes for women that are living lives today, which means they're driving their car, they're picking up their kid, they're dropping them off, they're going to work, they're hanging out with friends, they're going for a drink, they're donning so many hats. And I don't think it's enough to sort of pigeonhole them and like, oh, she's a princess. Like, who cares? Like, who wants to be a princess? Nobody's waiting around for some prince anyway. So I feel that those kind of antiquated notions had to be married with something that felt a little more real, something that people can identify with, regular people, not people who care about fashion, not people who are going to I don't know who those people are, but like red carpet events or whatever, which is why I never make any of those clothes, because I'm never invited to any of those things. I feel like, who's being invited to this stuff? Like, why are you making, where are they going? Why are they dressed like this, And I'm invited to some of these so-called, not the Met Gala and stuff, but I guess, like fashion parties and stuff. But even then, there's really, in my head, no need to bust out the kind of clothes that show up at these kinds of events. So I don't make them because I feel like if I wouldn't wear them, then I don't know. Then I guess my audience wouldn't either.
Yeah. I mean, so this is something that I've definitely noticed where, fashion is always seen as, or is always sort of represented in clothes and by some designers as excessive, so there'll be huge sleeves or there'll be a lot of ruffles, which is nice. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely very pretty to look at. And I think I get the aesthetic appeal of it for sure. But then these are not clothes that I would wear to go to classes at uni, for instance. These are not this is especially during COVID-19 times. Absolutely. During COVID-19 times, that I absolutely cannot be wearing all of this excess fabric on me, lest I brush next to someone, just by sheer size of the clothes that I'm wearing, and violate all social distancing norms. Absolutely. I love that it's so practical, and your clothing, and it sort of enables function, it enables comfort, and that I think is definitely something that's very, very important. And
I think so, because also because, just to interject, I think that people mistake being fashionable, quote unquote, with not necessarily being comfortable. And I think that being stylish and comfort can totally go hand. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So I think that For people who feel like, oh, I have to squeeze into this outfit, it's okay, I won't breathe, I'll put on Spanx, I'll do this, I won't have lunch, I won't have breakfast, I won't drink water, I won't have any salt for 2 days. All this stuff, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I think that how can you go out into, because as women we're always talking about equality and we're like, why aren't we being treated as equals and blah blah, and I feel like, okay, so here's a party, there's a sea of men wearing their suits and their shoes and a shirt, and they're comfortable, they're having a drink, and they're ha ha ha. And then there's these women and they're trotting about in like some uncomfortable pair of shoes and this outfit that's like trailing, and people are tripping on it, and then they're trying to like suck their tummy in. And I'm just thinking, I mean, if you want yourself to be really taken seriously, and if you're not comfortable wearing something you're wearing, then you're not putting your best foot forward. And so then to expect people to get past that when you yourself haven't gone past it is an uphill battle. And I think that we're selling ourselves short a little bit when we're fussing too much with all this stuff, which is why it's important that, for me, it's very important to look stylish. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to go to a party and disappear with a horde of other people. I want to stand out. I want to look different. I want all those things that women want. I want to be complimented, all those things. And I'm not apologetic about it either. But I don't want to do it at the expense of me being exhausted in 5 minutes, So, I mean, sometimes I want to wear heels. Mostly I'm just wearing flats because I'm petite and I've decided that I'm not kidding anyone, even when I'm wearing heels, that I am short. But sometimes I want to wear heels just because they're so fabulous and they look so nice. And, I was so excited when I bought them. But then what I do is I only wear it to places where I have to go and sit down because I don't want to stand in them,
Yeah.
And all my friends know it. They're like, ooh, she's busted out the heels. Give her a stool. Okay, because everybody has to make way. But then I don't want, because then I'm uncomfortable if I'm standing. So I'm like, listen, guys, if you want me to hang around, I have to sit down. Okay, find me a stool and I'll go. So I literally won't go out if I know it's going to be a crowded place and there's no stool, which now I guess in these COVID times seems like I can wear my heels at home comfortably and sit down on the couch. But, so you have to know yourself, and you have to know that once in a while, okay, you'll do something just to be silly, but as a philosophy, what is it that you really care about, and how do you marry the key things that make you tick?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mention what you do with heels, because I've stopped wearing heels, but when I was a teenager, which is like couple of years ago, so not even like a
I was
decade
going to say,
ago.
you still sound like one. So cute.
And so when I was a teenager, I was going through this like very heel obsessed time in my life, and I was determined to wear heels every time I went out to whatever was like a heel wearing suitable event, if
party,
that makes sense. Yeah, like a party, yeah. But even if it was like a nice-ish birthday dinner or something, I would make the effort to wear heels. But what I would do is I would always like carry a pair of flats with me in my massive bag, right? So my bag would never match my outfit. I would always have a big bag so I could make room for my flats and my heels. I would wear the heels in the car, and then when I would be on my way back, I would remove the heels, wear my flats, and I would just feel so free. Do you know what I mean?
Like New Yorkers. That's what they did. I mean, they just got into their sneakers, took the subway, slipped on the heels, and then got back into them. Because, I mean, you have to do what you need to do to survive, right? So that's fine. And I think it's great to try. I mean, the whole, let's face it, clothes and fashion and shoes and all of it, it's meant to give you that temporary change from your regular life. So, you're always walking around in your slippers, and once in a while, you put on a heel, you put on your favorite heels and it puts a spring in your step. And why not? For me, it's not, if somebody wants to wear something that makes them look sexy, whether it has ruffles, whether it's all fine. But for me, it's such a personal thing. And because it's such an extension of the things I believe in and the things I want. And, I'm 46 now, and really I couldn't care less now what other people think of me. And am I wearing what is cool now or whatever? I don't care anymore. So for me, I don't make the clothes that women would want if those are the reasons they're buying it. I just want them to buy it because they think they look amazing and they're so comfortable, they're so happy, they can laugh and have a good time and they can come back and they can wear it again. It's simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of your design process, like parts of it that you touched on, actually sounded a bit like what architectural processes sound like, right? So you're serving a function. There's thought behind your design in terms of there should be pocket, there should be comfort, there should also be a certain kind of structure, etc. And I mean, so now that's become quite a popular topic to talk about, especially when you sort of look into the foray in sustainability, right? People are always thinking about, or they're talking about sustainable design or functional design and sustainability in fashion overall. And you mentioned that fashion was not something that you wanted to be associated with when you started off. So what is your take on all of this sustainability conversation that's going on now?
I think that there's so many different ways that you can approach sustainability, right? So I think that people perceive it to be this one thing where you're upcycling stuff and you're mending something or you're re-wearing something or you're using organic something. It's also tricky because there are so many reports that talk about organic cotton taking more land and more resources and more water than regular cotton. So the thing is that we don't know so much about everything. As a consumer, you would know even less. As a manufacturer, let's hope that people do the research. So yes, of course, those are things that you have to keep in mind. Fair labor practices, make sure everyone has health, make sure you're sourcing responsibly. All of these things are right. But I think for me, one of the key factors is that fashion in itself is not sustainable. Because what is fashion telling you? It's telling you, okay, this pant leg is really in right now. Wear it for 4 weeks and then a bootleg's going to come in. And then the skinny jean is going to come in. And then the boyfriend jean is going to come in. And then the mom jean is going to come in. The high waist. And so it compels you to keep chucking what you've just bought and buying something else. In that sense, whether you're using fair practices or whether you're making those jeans and then dyeing them in this most amazing dye that does not pollute rivers or whatever, it's better than doing it with the opposite, but it still doesn't fix the problem. The problem is greed. The biggest problem is that this whole fashion system is unsustainable because we are making too much of everything. There's too much, and it's being made too quickly and it's being made cheaply. And all of those have offshoots and therefore consequences. So for me, one of the most important things is also always to make clothes that were sustainable in the sense that we're suggesting something that has nothing to do with fashion. We're saying these clothes are already seasonless, they're already timeless. So now there's a lot of chatter saying, oh, in these COVID times, now clothes are going to become artisanal and minimal and practical and seasonless and timeless. That should have always been the need of the hour. We didn't need this whole thing to sort of blow up. Fair enough. And it's happened now, and it's time to sort of pause and reflect and do a rethink. But for me, the other side of the coin is that everything in fashion becomes a trend. And I hope that sustainability is also not this thing that everyone's, it's just become that word that, everyone is talking about it. But it's not enough to just do it lip service, right? So the more important thing is now, let's say for us as a brand, we wouldn't have to pivot our product because this is already stuff we do. And this is the stuff we've always done. And we've never followed trends and forecasts. And so we do our own thing. And, our collections go seamlessly from one season into the next, even into next year. We use a lot of our fabrics from years ago, even now, because we have a continuity in terms of palette and silhouettes and fabrics that we use and weavers that we use, right? So those things can be used. So we waste less.
Yeah.
But when you look at it in the context of fashion brands, then this is not sustainable at all. But if all these brands that were making hot pants now all of a sudden decide to make tunics and shirts and pants and kurtas, people that were making gowns or they were making, wedding outfits. Now all of a sudden everyone's going to make minimal art. We feel that the problem with that is, of course, everything becomes homogenous, but also it's not sincere. There has to be purpose behind the product. That's the only way to be sustainable. Why are you making what you're making? And the second step is, and how are you making it? If you have no good reason to make it, except that this is what everybody wants now because everyone's afraid they're going to get a virus and and because supply chains have been disrupted, that's not a good enough reason, because there has to be a cultural shift in the mindset for this to truly be sustainable. It's not enough to just say, oh, I'm upcycling something. But then you're like, yes, you must do that. But if you can't pay your employees, then you're not unsustainable as a business. So all the boxes have to be ticked simultaneously. You can't just do one thing and not the other. So for instance, we never go on sale and we don't discount our clothes because we never have that much inventory. Part of the reason is because we don't follow trends. And part of the reason is also because we never make that much, because our company is not based on, for lack of a better word, greed and constantly making revenue and quarter on quarter reports, sales reports. That's not why we do this. So even if we could sell more clothes, we don't necessarily make more clothes, because just because you're doing great one season, then you hire like 10 more tailors, let's say. And then the next season is slow. Some people just fire them, then rehire them. But that's not sustainable either. And so I think sustainability has to be looked at in a very holistic way. It's not just using this dye or using this cotton. It has to be a core ethos. It's how you live. You know, so if you make minimal clothes, but you live in a house with like clutter, that's confusing to me. I think everything has to be, a representation of what you believe in. So if you feel like you don't need to have more than like one pillow, then you don't need to have 25 pillows. It's just as simple as that. So, it's all connected.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I wanted to ask, what if you were wearing all the ruffles in the world? Would that justify the 25 pillows?
Well, see, some people are actually maximalists. They love stuff and they want stuff and they want a lot of it. And I don't know, I've never been that kind of person. I don't really like hoarding. I like, if I buy 2 new things, I try to remove 2 things from my cupboard. I've always grown up in Bombay. I lived in New York. I've always lived in small spaces that I could barely afford and had no room for anything really. So in that sense, I've lived that way. I just don't like being surrounded by a lot of stuff. It confuses me, it clutters my brain. And so I don't really like that in my clothes either. But I guess some people, I think that they do enjoy it. And I think that that's fine too. I just think that then if you're going to do that, at least if you're going to buy something that's beautifully made and can have all the ruffles in the world, and if you can sit down in the car without squishing them or whatever, that's great. But then maybe we don't need 10 of those because you're afraid that you went out on Friday night and you wore that outfit and then you put it on Instagram. Now everybody's seen it and you can repeat it, which is this bizarre thing that has come out of this fallout of Instagram and stuff, is that people don't want to repeat their clothes because other people saw them. And I'm thinking, so what? I mean, why would you not wear something you love? So I think that just that sort of mindfulness when we're buying things, it doesn't matter what you buy. It's really a question of how much, right? Because we can sit here all we like and say everybody should be wearing things that are hand spun and hand woven and all of that, but they could be a little expensive and not everybody can afford it. And then, can they wash an indigo dye thing at home with other clothes? And do they have to get on a train to get to work? So if you cannot fix someone's problems in life, then you can't really suggest an alternative, which is not even an option for them. But you can at least suggest buying less of it. That's the best, I suppose, that you can do, is because if we all buy less, then people will be forced to make less, and then less of it will end up in landfills. So,
And a lot of what you said also touched upon, sustainability, what sustainability means in business, because currently with what's going on in the US with the protests, there are so many, this is just one example, right? So what's going on in the US with the protests, there's so many companies like Zara, H&M, Adidas, and all of these big fast fashion brands who are like, hashtag Black Lives Matter on Instagram. And all of it is a publicity stunt, because when you look at their supply chains, which comprise mostly of people working in countries like Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, these people have not been paid. Matter. Their lives don't matter. Exactly. And they haven't been paid. Whenever they do work, they work in unsanitary, unhealthy, inhumane conditions. And a lot of it, then there's already been so much research done on this, right? This isn't just hearsay at this moment. This is proven when you go and look at websites belonging to Fashion Revolution or Extinction Rebellion and what have you. So when you talk about how your business has functioned, where you're not looking at growth or metrics, or you're not sort of obsessed with it,
Yeah.
So how can people move past, say, brands in India, for instance? How can they move past just giving lip service to this and actually include sustainability within their business models?
I think the thing is, it's not an external thing, unfortunately. I think this boils down to how you live your life. What are the things you live by? What are the things you believe in? These are core philosophies. So I think that no pandemic, but perhaps I'm being a little bit cynical about it, but I do feel that people have short memories. I feel that, if a vaccine showed up in 6 months, let's just say, I think people might go back to their old ways. So there's all this chatter about it, but I feel the only way that change can come is if it comes from within. And so, like I said earlier, you have to instill a culture where you believe that these things are important. Meaning, I've hired somebody, I'm responsible for his family now. I will grow my business slowly so that I never have to let him go just because I miscalculated and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to sell so many clothes. And then I didn't, and I made some losses. And now, to hell with it, he's dispensable. Those kinds of things are a mindset, And I don't know if the way you run your business, I mean, for us, for instance, we've never wanted external funding for some of these same reasons. We don't really want the pressure of having to perform,
Right.
on tight deadlines and these sort of quarterly data sheets and things like that. So I think that for us, what's more important is that we enjoy going to work every day, and we want to make sure that everyone that comes to work for us looks forward to it. And that's why we have one of the lowest rates of attrition. Nobody leaves. Even the girls that left and wanted to go get engaged or go to university, they've come back. And so for us, those things are more important. But for a lot of people, those things are not that important. Let's face it. I mean, they want to make money. They want to make more money. And they want to make, I don't know, I think it was Vivian Westwood that said something about why this need to piss on every bush, that's my thing. But some people, but that's what drives them. And if that is what drives them, then I'm not sure that any external source will make them shift how the lens with which they see things,
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, of course, they should have fair practices, and but sometimes big designers, people are working and there's no air conditioning, they're hot, they're sweaty, there's not enough bathrooms. There's all kinds of stories out there. So I think that how do you change that? That's the way you think. That's a big one.
Yeah. And were there any consequences in your style of doing business and in your process of designing clothes through these years? Were there any consequences to doing things differently, which perhaps may put off other designers in doing things differently?
Well, I mean, I don't know what I mean, for one of my challenges initially when I started designing was that I was making clothes that weren't around. And so it kind of intimidated the customer. They couldn't really understand it. They were like, well, where's the bottom? And they were like, no, you can pick a bottom from here. They were like, but does it go with this? And we're like, yeah, everything goes with everything. That's the whole point. And they're like, but what if I don't buy the pant? We're like, well, you can buy it with your own jeans. We're like, will it go with it? So the whole idea of what we were trying to suggest was not something that they were used to buying. That was a bit of a challenge. I feel like you have to dig your heels in. So I don't know if I understood your question correctly, but if you're asking me what were the difficulties I faced, I think that if you believe in something that you're doing, even if there are difficulties, but if you believe it, what's your other option? If this is the only thing you care about, then you just do it. Obviously, I mean, I suppose it has to be well researched and it has to be a well made product that makes sense. It can't just be something you believe in when it has no relevance to anything else. But if all those things are in check, then of course there'll be difficulties. I mean, it's difficult to run a business trying to do everything the right way, doing everything above board, making sure all the money is in white and in check, and making sure your taxes are paid and the paperwork is endless. It's not easy, but you do it because that's the only way you believe things should be done. Yeah. So you dig your heels in and you do it. The short answer, I guess.
And you talked a little bit about how your clothes have always been seasonless, and that's interesting because Gucci just announced this landmark decision to reduce the fashion shows that they hold per year from 5 to 2, which, I mean, this is a landmark decision as per what they do and what their business model and their brand subscribes to. And I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on the role that clothes and fashion will play during this pandemic and post-pandemic. Because, like, for instance, right now we're all under lockdown, we're all working from home, so the divide between office and home has been blurred, right? So how do you think that will reflect in clothes?
So, see, for us, we don't really make a lot of clothes for really formal occasions. I mean, we have the limited edition line that you would wear if you had to go for your own, I mean, I guess a very simple your own wedding or otherwise a friend's wedding. But otherwise, we make clothes that will take you from picking up your daughter from class all the way to dinners and then weddings, right? Because for me, it was always important as a label that, let's say you really got the DNA of my brand. You trusted me with making all the decisions that you couldn't be bothered to make, that you shouldn't only be able to come to me if you had a dinner to go to with your friends. What if you wanted, because, you wear other clothes in the day. And so I wanted to make sure that all of those options were there. So that said, I have a lot of clothes that I lounge in the day that I wear when I walk over to my studio and that I wear at home. So I suppose people could still buy those. Of course, right now, nobody's even stepping out of the house, so they can't be bothered. They'll just be wearing whatever they have, or they're wearing pajamas. They're not even showering. Who knows what's going on? So it is what it is. Of course, hopefully this is not going to last forever and people will tire of it and people want to go out and they want, we're social creatures. So at some point, we're going to bounce back. We'll find mechanisms, masks, whatever, hand sanitizers, what have you, but we'll find a way to be surrounded by people. That said, we won't have to shift what we make anyways, because we already make all of these things. And even if people aren't going to big events, that might be one of those few things that will change for the foreseeable future, maybe like very crowded events or things like that. We don't really make a lot of clothes like that. I mean, we make clothes that you would just wear to go to a friend's place for dinner, which I'm guessing people will still do. We're not going to live in isolation for years, and this might take years. So, yes, I mean, I think that having fewer collections, going back, sort of circling back to what Gucci did, see, we don't show at Fashion Week in any case. And I've been saying for a long time that I feel that, Fashion Week, the challenge with Fashion Week now is just reach, right? You're showing in a venue with X amount of people. That's it. But with social media, I mean, you really could get it out to a far more, like a larger audience if you had that kind of following. Now, what if you don't have that following? Then you need to do this also for stockists and for business. But I think that Fashion Week together, in any case, there are too many. And in any case, there's not just labels that are credible or talented that are showing. A lot of them are showing just because they have deep pockets or they're being sponsored. I don't know, whatever the reasons are, or they know celebrities. Right. So there's all kinds of things. Like in every discipline, there's the good and the bad. And so I think Fashion Week in any case needed a bit of an update because it was becoming a little bit irrelevant or something. It was missing something. But I think so it's twofold, the question. One is what will happen to Fashion Week? Who knows? They're really going to have to try to fix this because it's a crowded event. I don't know if people want to go, but maybe that's just the near future. But if collections change, and for instance, there are only 2 collections, in any case, in India, we only do like 2 Fashion Weeks. We don't do like a separate resort and pre-cruise and post-cruise. And I don't even know what the other collections are, but I'm sure that there are many others. Like some people do, yeah, they're like post cruise. You take a nap.
I love that.
So I don't know, because some people do 16 collections in a year. It's insane. So they do like couture, and then they do like
That's
kind
crazy.
of couture. I don't know, whatever. But I think that as long as the number of collections gets reduced, obviously the pressure also changes. I feel like you shouldn't even have collections. I think you should just design as and when. I mean, as an artist, it would have been unheard of to say, hey, every year you have to do 3 exhibitions. Well, who
Right.
works like that? You can't retrofit your entire life into a calendar, But what do artists do? They create something special, and then when they're ready to show it. Or it's trash and they junk it. So I think that would be the ideal way to do it. We've tried it several times because we don't do fashion week, so we still have some leeway. We have our own retail stores, so we kind of do our own calendar. And sometimes everybody's already released their collection, and I'm still sort of dragging my heels and like, oh, I'm not ready, and then it'll show up. But the thing is, everyone will have to come on board. So it's fine that Gucci's decided to do only 2 collections, and that's fantastic. But the thing is that if you want to go from simply lowering the number of collections to just going into this, because he said the clothes were going to be seasonless as well. So now if you're going to go into a seasonless, sort of free-flowing kind of calendar, then stockists have to be on board as well. Because if your distribution is not on board, which is kind of what happens to us now, if we're the only ones trying to do this left of center, like I'm not ready, I want to do something as and when I want to do it. But everybody else is showing on the 15th of Feb. And, the stockist has set up one big tent to show all the new collections. Then we are the only ones who are not there,
Yeah.
Because what's the alternative? So sometimes we're like, okay, we won't be there. And that's fine. But I think that everyone needs to get on board. I think what it will do is it lifts some of the pressure off of production and factories, right? Because what happens is when you have these collections, you have these deadlines, and then there's all this stuff being produced. It's like a tsunami of merchandise. But if you were to do it slowly across the whole year, then it might just lift some of that pressure on that whole supply chain. For instance, if you're using artisans, it's even harder because it's not just factories. They have to weave it. I mean, it's only that quickly they can weave something.
Right.
So I think it will help. And I think that this is something that people will have to wrap their heads around. But I'm curious to see what will come out of brands that were so strictly tied to this whole fashion cycle and now all of a sudden are untethered. And so what will come out of it? Will it be something that's honest, or will it just be more of what the fashion industry tends to do as a PR exercise? So
there's actually this brand in the UK which is called Boohoo. I think it's either Boohoo or In the Style, right? And they launch, quote unquote, launch a new sort of set of clothes every week. So they actually have like 52 cycles of like clothes that are for each week. And it's crazy. And that especially because Gucci and a lot of other sort of like, I don't know, Louis Vuitton, all of these are luxury brands, right? Which is not to say that all of them are necessarily sustainable, but they are a different category. But I think the more important thing is whether we'll see change in all of these fast fashion brands, which are so used to churning out clothes at this unprecedented rate,
For me, I find that, I just read somewhere that Zara's online sales went up 95% in April. And and I just thought, okay, so here's what's going to happen. Of course, they have, I don't know how many billion stores across the world, but so, they made losses, but they'll move everything online. They'll just move it. They'll just shift it all. It will really depend on the consumer. A consumer is going to wake up and say, no, I don't want to buy this because this is destroying our planet. Or consumers are going to say, well, what is me buying this third t-shirt have anything to do with a virus that could have been made in a lab or maybe came from a bat? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it'll really depend on if people can connect the dots and say, listen, it's not the direct virus having something to do with the way we dress now. Do they feel like this is something that has to come from a space of like truly wanting change? Or is it just something like, okay, fine, this virus is here, and for 2 years, I'm not going to see my friends. I won't buy anything. I'll just buy pajamas and then go
Right.
back to your old ways. So that kind of remains to be seen. But I feel that people do have short memories, in the end. So they'll really have to feel for this, for it to happen. They'll have to believe that this is not the way to continue.
Yeah. And that sort of put in the effort and the energy to envisage a future where things can be different, or even like start working towards it to make things slightly different.
Yes, because it takes effort, right? It's not so simple to just buy something and be like, oh, what did I know? I just bought it because it was there. To sort of do that little bit of extra legwork to just figure out, why are you buying from this brand? Is there a story? What is their story? What is the purpose behind this product? Why did they make it? Why do they care so much about this product? Why do they not care about this product? Whatever it is, to ask those few questions, it's work. And people are like, come on, man, I just want to buy a dress. So there's that. So both are valid in their own way, but I think that we can't really afford to be lazy about this anymore. I think that we owe it to the next generation. I don't know, our oceans are just going to be full of clothes. There's not going to be any water in them even. Like, I don't know where we're going to throw it, or the landfills are going to be done. And then we'll have to just chuck it in the... So yeah, that's going to be tough.
And to that end, do you think that sort of the next line of, quote, sustainable clothing businesses / brands would be brands that prioritize vintage? So for example, it's just like a pop-up shop or like an e-commerce shop that sells vintage clothes, or if it's secondhand or even clothing rental. Do you think we'll see an increase in that?
I hope so. I wore vintage lehenga for my own wedding because I didn't find anything else, and that was so beautiful. And I thought, to hell with it, I don't care. I bought it. Somebody sold it, whether it was in distress or not. I wasn't so superstitious about it anyways. So I hope, my partner Vikram started, because he does care about just this excess, this sort of culture of excess and greed and stuff. So he started this company called Rewear, which is exactly what it does is it sells secondhand designer clothing. Because, people buy all these lehengas and stuff, they wear it one time. And then they're like, oh, I wore it for my wedding. Everybody saw me. I can't wear it again. And then it just sits in your cupboard, and then there's nothing you can do about it. And there are other people that want something original that perhaps don't want to buy a copy, but they just can't afford it at full price. And so this is one way for them to make it available to them. And I think it should change, because I feel that if people are also feeling like, their purse strings are a bit tight and they're feeling sort of strapped, some people might have lost their jobs or, uncertainty economically, then I think that this is a good option, because, you might still love clothes and you still want to buy something. You still have that itch to, have sort of retail therapy, but at least you're not adding to the mess. It's, it's in the system and you get it. And as far as concerns about people worrying about getting COVID because somebody could have worn it, who's going to wear some lehenga when you've got a cough and a cold? They're probably in bed in pajamas. And even if they touched it and handled it, of course, everything comes here, goes straight, gets sanitized, goes for dry cleaning, gets sanitized, gets packaged. Literally in that sense, you have less chances of this because his thing is online, and a lot of these things are online. Nobody's even trying it, right? And then there's always time between one person sending it and the next person trying. Plus, we don't have enough information, to be honest, about how long this virus lingers on fabric and on surfaces. So there's that. But the fact is, if you're going into Zara, you have no idea how many people have touched something, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's that same risk. But I think there's ways to always mitigate those kinds of risks. So I don't think that that's really a concern. I do think that eventually, if people are so concerned about buying clothes and not wearing them often, then these kinds of options, rentals, for example, they'll work better because you're not spending all that money, and then you're not. And who has the room for all these clothes? Also,
Yeah, I think
So,
that's a very valid point. I mean, there's this documentary that I recommend people listening and you watching as well. Although you're a cynic already, so I would sort of go in there
oh no.
with like a little bit of distance, because it's a documentary that can actually infuriate a lot of people. It certainly infuriated me. It's called Fashion.
What's it
It's
called?
on BBC. It's Breaking Fashion.
Breaking Fashion. Okay, I haven't seen it.
It's a 6-part series, right? And it's actually on this brand in the UK that I mentioned called In the Style.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's just like how they go through so the founder of this, he is such a, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I can, yeah, I'll edit it out. He's such a, so it's basically follows his journey before the launch of their latest offering, right? And he just goes around shouting at everyone, and everybody in his team reports of all of these mental health issues and concerns that
Oh
they
my
have
God.
prior to the launch of
Yikes.
this. And then it follows the influencers who wear his
Ugh.
clothes and sort of like, put forth.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And like towards the end, basically, long story short is that within an hour of releasing their latest clothing line online on their website,
Yeah.
they get £64,000. So they earn £64,000. Because they leverage the influencers' social capital. So and they sort of are like, okay, this is all like one piece. It's not. But they're like, this is like limited stock.
Of
So if you
course.
don't buy
Yeah.
immediately, you will lose out. And within 1 hour of them going live, that's the kind of revenue that they make. So it's crazy. But I definitely recommend people watching it and for you to watch it so you can get an idea of, everyone can get an idea
So
of
we
just
don't have
how,
to be one of those people that's supporting
exactly.
them.
Yeah, exactly. And because, I think that sort of is such an important place to begin to sort of, you wouldn't even sort of get to sustainability in any sort of
None.
without thinking about what is growth. Is growth just an endlessly positive,
If
increasing?
it's just a number, if it's just a number, then you're not going to care if someone's unhappy while they're working with you.
Exactly.
Because that's not even on your radar. It's not something that you even consider. It doesn't matter. But I think that's not sustainable because it's not sustainable for that human being. And technically, it's not sustainable for a company that should grow organically and in a healthy way, in spirit and in soul. So, but companies like that also make money. So,
yeah,
unfortunately, life is not fair. So,
yeah, but I think it's spot on when you said that consumers, if they just put in that little extra step of asking questions about the product or what it means to them or the story or the purpose behind what is being, I think that in itself can be a good shift, just mindlessly purchase it.
Exactly, because I think that in the end, it's in the hands of the consumer. We have the power to disrupt this stuff, right? If everyone decided, unanimously, okay, that's it. Nobody's saying don't go and don't buy a t-shirt. We're just saying don't buy 10 just because you can buy 10. Just buy what you need, then manufacturers will be forced to rethink things. Right now, what happens is they make hundreds and thousands and millions of clothes, and then they sell some of it, and then they discount everything. Everything goes on discount. Everything goes on sale. So then you feel like something you would not have bought at full price. You feel, oh, what the hell? I'll just buy it because it's on sale. Why? You didn't even want it in the first place, ever.
Yeah.
Now you want it only because it's cheaper. That's the only thing that's changed. So it's that psychology. And we'll have to, that whole paradigm has to shift for things to really,
And I think this is my final question, although I definitely want to ask you lots more questions, but I know that you have other things to go off and do. So I'll make this my final question. Are there any practices that you've sort of adopted during this lockdown that you may previously not have had pre-lockdown that you're going to then carry forward post-pandemic?
I think for us, one of the things that changed very quickly was because with our retail stores shut immediately and all our distribution and therefore no access, we had to move all our attention online. So I think that one of the things that, and we don't have a large online presence to begin with. So it's not every single thing that we've ever made that we've shot and put online anyways. But now I think we were always very keen. I mean, personally, I love going into a store and, I want to feel the, just the wall and the space and the air I'm breathing and the fragrance and the lighting and the music. I want to feel the theater of it all. When I'm shopping, I want to touch the fabrics, I want to try things on, and I want people to help me on the floor that are helpful but not invasive or not pushy. And so we've trained a lot of our staff to make shopping at our stores more than just a pleasant experience, a memorable experience. And so now what we try to do very quickly is to try and transfer some of that, because we're such a client servicing based company as it is. We try to move it quickly to our online e-shop and our online experience, because in any case, of course, you can access us with WhatsApp and calls and messages on Insta and Facebook and all of that stuff. But what we also wanted to do was be able to reach out to people that couldn't have access to the store. So, of course, online helps for international customers and, people who in any case can't come to the country or are not traveling. But also for people in the city, one of the things we had to do very quickly, because the stores aren't open, is reach out to our customers and say, yeah, okay, we've shopped these clothes, we've shot them 360 degrees. Here's what the back would look like of the kurta, the front, this is the color, this is how it would fall, and get in touch with them so that they're virtually shopping. So they're in the comfort and safety of their home. They're not comfortable, obviously, to come to the stores. In some cases, they can't even. And then we will send the clothes to them. So locally, it can happen the same day. So let's say they select something and they bought it, we send it, they keep it for 24 hours, and let's say that it doesn't work for them, it can be refunded or exchanged. And then we have our own internal cycle. So for instance, Bangalore, our store is already open. So we have a cycle so that, let's say, of course, the sanitizers and masks and gloves and all of that stuff is in place. But you can also come in with prior appointments if you don't want to run into anybody else. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that we make sure that, let's say you've tried something on and you didn't buy it, then we rotate those clothes so that nobody else gets to wear them for 24 hours. Of course, we steam everything before and after, so there's some things that we've tried to do just in the virtual space, where we're reaching out to people and then we're trying to just send stuff across, kind of old school, I guess, in a way. And I think that maybe that's something that perhaps going forward, at least for the foreseeable future, we might have to continue doing, because, some people might be more uncomfortable just yet to start shopping or to loiter even, maybe they just maybe they just don't want to get into the car. Maybe they don't want to, I don't know. I can understand the hesitation right now to go through all this just to buy a kurta that you possibly don't need. So those are some of the things we're doing. We're just trying to do our client servicing a little better.
Yeah. Have you taken on any new habits that you didn't have before this lockdown began, as a family or just as Payal the person?
I mean, I'm getting used to not doing anything at all, like the whole day. I have to say, I wasn't actually let me just, give you an introduction to this sentence, actually, because the thing is, I'm not very, I'm weird like that. Like I can be very social if I'm in the mood to be social. Like if I'm going out, I'll be like really chatty and laughing and talking to everybody. Or I can be like super antisocial. I don't want to meet anybody, and most people will annoy me. And I can be quite a Larry David in that way. And so I'm actually the happiest being home. So that way, my carbon footprint, I'm very sustainable like that, because I'm so lazy. I'm so little bit, I don't want to get on a flight. People are like, hey, can you get on a flight? And, we'll have a meeting in Delhi. I was like, what? I was like, what? Yeah. Just like call me on the phone. Just like, we'll chat and the meeting is over. And so I don't want to get out of this. I like my safe space. I like being home. I like things the way they are in my house because I set it up that way. So I've been actually, what I miss, I think, is just the little things that I took for granted, just having tea with all my girls and, calling for nutties in the middle of the day, and they know I'm getting a bit crabby. They'll be like, oh, just kanpat, nutties leke aao, and they'll give me some nutties. And I just miss those things because I feel like gosh, it's like slapping everybody on their heads and, like whacking them in the bums. I'm like, what's going to happen now? Like, am I not supposed to touch anybody? Like, and not in this weird, like sketchy way, like there's a whole bunch of us girls and stuff. And I'm just thinking, gosh, like that closeness and that proximity, and and you're walking on the street and you're wearing this mask, and I don't know if somebody's scowling or they're smiling at me. I can't really read their face. I'm like trying to figure out, oh, is that crinkle near the eye, a smile? It's really kind of hostile in a way, and I feel that I missed that. I haven't been able to get back to it, and that I miss. But otherwise, I could get used to this. To be honest, somebody's asking me creatively, what have you done? I mean, to be honest, I have a cat who's trying to eat my dog, and I have this pup, and I'm trying to train it, and there's so much going on that I've really had no time. Because I'm also in a flat. So it's not like the dog is running around in some garden that I have outside. He's scared to go downstairs because he's poorly socialized thanks to this lockdown. It's many things. And so I feel like the only creative thing that I've done, and it's not even really creative, is that I have all these plush toys for him, which he destroys in 5 seconds. And then at the end of it, I sew them back. Because I'm like, we're really poor right now. And I sew them back. So I'm not to buy new.
That's actually quite sweet.
It's so cute. I'm like, it's sustainable.
Dog mom.
Yeah, and it's so sustainable. I'm like, I'm not going to throw this toy. I will stitch it. Here to use it again. Okay, and that's the only thing I've been doing. And it's so dumb. And I'm thinking, wow, like people are like making all these plans and they're learning new skills and they're learning new languages and they're like cooking all these meals and they're doing yoga and I don't know what the hell. I'm not doing anything. I'm just like, I ordered a projector for my birthday and because I'm stuck in the room with this fellow and when he's sleeping, I just put it on and watch like a documentary or Netflix or Seinfeld for the 100th time, something stupid, That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything else is stressful enough. I feel like I don't want to add right now.
Yeah, and I think for everybody listening in, I think one major takeaway they should have from this conversation is how dedicated you are to sustainability, that you sit down and sew those toys back. Get your puppy, you have to rip them out. I think that is all, like, that is the level of commitment that we need.
I know. Up to the pet. It goes all the way to the pets. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Payal.
Thank you, Sachi. Thank you so much.
Speaking with you.
Yeah.
Thank
Ditto.
you.
Thank you so much.
And that marks the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find all the relevant links and handles to know more about our guest this week in the episode description. If you have any feedback, suggestions, requests, or simply just want to get in touch with us, then please do head over to our podcast website. We are available to flag and say hi to via Facebook, Instagram, or email. Thank you and see you next week.